What is going on, everybody? Zachariah Jazz back at it again to bring you the bullshit topic of my day. So, first of all, let me start by saying that I apologize that I've been so quiet lately and that I haven't been as active on the campaign page or anything like that. That is because I had something special brewing just for y'all. Everybody that has been with me on this mission, everybody that's been with me on this campaign, I had something very, 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 very special and exciting just for y'all. It was going to be glorious. And instead, I have to do it like this because the person who was involved with it canceled. So, a little over a month ago, I believe it was, I got a call from the Valley Community Policing Council. Now, I don't fuck with the community policing councils. I don't like the terminology. Though it was brought to my attention a different perspective maybe as the community policing the police. But, it's a nice perspective, it's a nice sentiment, but I don't really see it like that. We're all about community defense, right? Because we believe that police are the problem. Anyway, the Valley Community Policing Council invited me to their annual monthly meeting, the third of every Thursday. This one was on the 26th. This coming Thursday, they invited me to confront the president of the Albuquerque Police Officers Association, Shaun Willoughby himself. But due to recent events and police shootings, specifically the police getting shot, he canceled. I don't think he knew I was going to be on, but I guess because of police getting shot, he can't show up. So, since I won't be able to do that, I decided to do this instead because I'm eager, I'm impatient, and because it needs to be said, and because y'all need to hear it. They wanted to push it back until January and February. I might still get that opportunity, but I'd rather just do it like this. So, if this seems kind of awkward, I apologize. I'm going to be reading off a teleprompter, and I will be starting that now. I was going to begin with an interview Shaun Willoughby gave to KOB, but instead, I'm going to start with their website that I just found as I'm writing this. This Crime Matters More website, that is the APOA's propaganda machine, contrasts three things they see as comparative to fit a sort of controversial narrative to serve their agenda. They are paid sick leave, banning plastic grocery bags, and addressing crime. Now, any sensible or reasonable person acknowledges that none of these holds any merit compared to the other all the way around. Knowing that to be true, I find myself nearly hysterically laughing because they even went so far as to do a survey asking the community what is most important to them. 465 people participated. Now that's only 465 out of the 562,281 people that call this city home, and they have the audacity to claim that small amount of people represents this city as a whole. While they make the case that the county commission needs to build the mental health facility they've held up since 2015, the rest of their argument falls very short of making any sense to people that understand what public safety to the public actually means. Public safety to the APOA means brutal police force with free-range authority to do whatever they want and not have to suffer any of the consequences of their actions. I'd call it willful ignorance to completely disregard the fact that this is already known to be the case. For the community and the people on the ground advocating for it every day, public safety means safety from the police. It means preventative actions such as community healing, community defense, not community policing. It means restorative justice and investing in the community that's actually affected by crime, addiction, homelessness, and police violence. This work in and of itself is a means to abolish a crime that the APOA believes is more important than the people committing it. To them, these people do not matter. It's the reason they had the nerve to co-opt the Black Lives Matter title. For the people affected by and the families torn apart by police and state violence, Black Lives Matter was a rallying call, saying that it's time to stand up and it's time to make a change because we know that elected officials won't do it without us putting the necessary pressure on them. A movement began that vibrated throughout the world. This Crime Matters More and things like it, such as Blue Lives Matter, are an attempt to take that from us. It's a statement telling us that our lives do not matter. But of course, they wouldn't say that out loud, but cover it up by saying stupid shit like I have black friends or something stupid like that. Because honestly, I don't care, and it doesn't absolve you from being racist. Now, some people will try to argue and say that Black Lives Matter doesn't pertain to the greater majority of people in this city because the majority are not black. For that, I have a counter argument. When we say Black Lives Matter or Black liberation, it, in its broader perspective, or perhaps a result of racial justice, equity, and equality, it means not only for black people, but for everybody. Racism is a power structure, and black people, since the bloody colonization of this country, have been to this day at the very bottom of that power structure, with white people at the very top. And don't confuse race color with social economic class. By this understanding of the racial power structure, anything that benefits black people will ultimately benefit everybody within this system. Call it trickle-up economics if that helps your understanding of it. That being said, this entire propaganda scheme and its rhetoric is harmful to the greater community the APOA would have brutalized by the Albuquerque Police Department. Shaun once said, "The whole system is set up to fail, and the taxpayers and the people in this community, like me and my family, are the ones that are taking the brunt of it." Really look at this process. It is absolutely out of control. The entire department and the process within it are out of control. Your officers are running out the door. Really look at every single state or agency that's been involved in this process. What is happening? Did it bring trust and harmony with the community? I don't think so. So let me add that Shaun doesn't even fucking live in Albuquerque. So I just want to add that. Every single day in cities throughout the country, we continue to see victims of police violence. Victims who cannot tell us their stories because they're dead, and in the majority of these murders, the people who murdered them go on a paid vacation until they're back out on the streets to kill again. Their victims are more often than not suffering from some form of mental illness crisis, are more often than not black people who weren't doing anything that would justify their execution and being stripped of their right of due process, but for some reason or another, this power-tripping cop decided that this would be his victim's last moments on earth. In recent months, as part of the APOA's racist propaganda campaign, they launched a YouTube series where people posing as former police officers whom shall not be named, with voice grabbers and blacked out faces, are given an opportunity to testify to the handcuffed environment they're subjected to under the DOJ consent decree, or the CASA. The first was supposedly a rookie who said this in the video. In quote, "The suspect proceeded to fight us. We used force on him, got him in custody, and we're in trouble for it. A lot of trouble. Most of my life, I've just said, hey, do the right thing, work hard, get through it. We're not here. It's just not sustainable." And that's what other guys have told me too, and that's why most everybody in my squad is quitting. End quote. Part 2 was the testimony of a man who claims was an officer for 20 years, of which most was served as part of the Albuquerque Police Department. Here's some of his testimony. End quote. "Working before the DOJ, you would love to do your job. You would take care of business and do your job and feel like you gave the taxpayers what they paid for. After the DOJ came in, you're pretty much limited on what you can do, and I think the department has handcuffed the officers to where they're really not doing their jobs." End quote. Next is a tidbit from part 3 of the series. For context, the interviewer asked him if the job was as he expected under the consent decree. Begin quote, "When I first joined, yes, the agreement was there. I read it and understood it, but ABD in its reaction to anything that's happened is always a knee-jerk reaction. So the DOJ will come back and say, okay, this is what we want. So then it's 3 simple steps, do this, this, and this. APD will react by doing this, and this, and creating an environment for APD officers to, in essence, be handcuffed to be able to do their job. And at this point in time, they've gone so far as to create an environment where officers are afraid to do their job, not because they know they have a criminal, for instance, that does something. The criminal tries to do something else, they get into a use of force. The officer is not afraid to use force. The officer is not afraid to use force. They do so properly. Most of the use of forces I'm seeing personally are always justified. Most of the time, those officers had the ability to go to higher levels of use of force, but they didn't. Officers aren't getting in trouble for the use of force. They're not scared about what they did. What they're scared of is all the getting in trouble for everything else." End quote. Let me remind every single one of you watching this video right now, these cops do not deserve praise for not using what this man would call higher levels of force. Fuck that. He goes on to say that IA is there for malice and to look for the bad officers, and how he got in trouble for removing his seatbelt and for cursing on camera. Ultimately, these cops are not afraid of getting in trouble for repeatedly being non-compliant to the consent decree. They obviously avoid any kind of accountability despite it. These cops admitted it themselves, and because of that, I believe that what Shaun is saying is to just get rid of the consent decree, because at the end of the day, the Albuquerque Police Department isn't even complying with it anyway, so why keep spending money on it, right? So my question is, what are they even being handcuffed from doing? Here's some facts, statements, and statistics from the Monitor reports for you, just in case you didn't already know them, so pay attention. I'll start with IMR 12, excuse me. APD's serious shortfalls during IMR 12 by management oversight of academy training, deleterious failures pertaining to oversight and discipline, all the way up to executive level failures in oversight, command, and control, discipline, supervision, and training. Each of these can be contributed to APD leadership. Primary compliance in IMR 12, 100%. Secondary compliance, 91%. Operational compliance, 64%. Now, primary compliance is their compliance to implement the reforms suggested or recommended by the Department of Justice. Now, the secondary compliance is what was it? Their ability to, or their compliance to train these reforms. Now, operational compliance is the amount of times that they've actually implemented these reforms when they're subduing a suspect, or they're out in the field in the line of duty working or brutalizing people, right? That's what those mean. So again, I'll read those statistics back. Primary compliance in IMR 12, 100%. Secondary compliance, 91%. Operational compliance, 64%. From IMR 11 to 12, 0% change to primary compliance, a 2.2% reduction to secondary compliance, and a 3% reduction to operational compliance. Means they're not complying to these reforms. The Monitor reports an ineffective internal affairs system of use of force command, oversight, and supervision. If not for this, there would be a significant higher case count of use of force instance reports, meaning they're just not being reported. Now it's like at the beginning of COVID, right? And all the amount of people that weren't being tested. They wanted to say that, because more people being tested, there's more cases. No, there's more cases and they're not being tested. So we don't have the actual numbers. The number is lower because they're not being reported. The Monitor comments that the FRB and APD endorses such behaviors and unlawful conduct. Now, IMR 13. At this point, the disciplinary system at APD routinely fails to follow its own written policy and virtually decimates its disciplinary requirements in favor of refusals to recognize substantial policy violations, and instead often sustaining minor related violations and ignoring more serious violations. In other cases, APD simply defies its own written guidance regarding discipline, for example, implementing discipline well below that required by its own disciplinary matrix. Example of these counter-CASA processes include the following: replacing a matrix required 8 to 32 hour suspension with a written reprimand, refusal to recognize repeat offenses which by policy require enhanced penalties, failure to consider aggravating circumstances in determining appropriate discipline but nearly always considering mitigating circumstances, a virtual shutdown of investigations in IAFD, possibly delaying disciplinary action for use of force violations until discipline is time-barred by the union contract, and charging lesser included policy violations instead of the often more fitting, more serious of the policy violations. APD is unwilling to go through any machination to avoid disciplining officers who violate policy or supervisors who fail to note policy violations or to act on them in a timely manner. The Monitor's report goes on to add the following. Interestingly, We note this aversion to discipline does not seem to apply to civilian personnel who are often subjected to maximum penalties for relatively minor violations. So does their crime against the people not matter? What about crime matters more? Do their crimes not count? APD recorded a combined 298 Level 2 and Level 3 use of force cases compared to 311 cases during IMR 12. Out of these 298 cases, APD recorded 244 Level 2 cases and 54 Level 3 cases compared to 232 Level 2 and 79 Level 3 cases during IMR 12. Per the CASA, IAFD is required to complete 95% of its use of force cases within 90 days. IAFD completed only 3 Level 2 cases. That's 1% of all Level 2 cases within the 90 days to meet operational compliance. IAFD completed only two of the Level 3 force cases within the 98 days. 2 of 54 equals only 4%. Now, this goes to Shaun Willoughby's and these alleged cops or supposed cops' statements of officers being handcuffed, right? So here's the latest reports from APD's three anti-crime operations that show no parts of the DOJ's consent decree in any way handcuff officers from doing their jobs. So the 40th report, felony warrants cleared 20, new felony arrests 17, misdemeanor arrests 6, moving citations 34, stolen vehicles recovered 8, leads referral 4. The 41st report, felony warrants cleared 42, new felony arrests 16, misdemeanor warrants cleared 16. That could be wrong. I might have jotted down the wrong number. Misdemeanor citations 1, moving citations 165, stolen vehicles recovered 3, firearms recovered 4, leads referral 3. Now the 42nd report, felony warrants cleared 54, new felony arrests 36, misdemeanor warrants cleared 15, moving citations 282, stolen vehicles recovered 9, firearms recovered 4, leads referral 1. I can't wait to see what IMR 14 has to say about all that. So not to necessarily end the statement because I have more to say that's just not on my teleprompter, but I demand that Shaun Willoughby and the APOA end their campaign as it achieves nothing except for harm vulnerable communities on the receiving end of police brutality. Now, I don't want to disregard the officers that have been shot recently. One of them was the father of an old friend from middle school, Officer Verbeck. I don't know him personally. I've heard he's a good guy. His daughter vouches for him. I don't disregard that. What I want to put in the spotlight is the circumstances that cause people to be criminals, right? And this isn't to, how should I say, advocate for a criminal way of life, but to essentially abolish the circumstances that create the criminal way of life, right? Because these people needed something at some point in their lives that led to them being this way, or something happened to them that led to them being this way. Nobody ever just wakes up, or grows up one day finally understanding the world and decides to say, hey, I'm going to be a fucking criminal. It was influences that brought them to this point. There was circumstances that brought them to this point. There was a catalytic situation that brought them to this point. And that's what we need to get to the root of. Now, people who you normally back the blue, right? I'd like to back human beings. But people who normally back the blue would try to counter my argument by saying, this whole war on law enforcement, defund the police. Well, that's not true. We, especially not here in Albuquerque, City Council just passed, what was it, a 2% to 4% increase of their APD's budget for the fiscal year of 2022. That's not a defunding of police. They might be losing officers because more officers are leaving the department because maybe we just have a fucking shitty police department. So here's some factors that play a role in how officers think about the risk of being shot. One factor is a militarization of police training. Two, a police culture that amplifies tales of downed officers. This is not to disregard officers that are actually shot, but they have a lot to say about officers shot rather than the people that officers shoot. And the proliferation of guns among civilians. We're a pro-gun state. We're pro-2A. I'm pro-2A. I have a gun. But they should not be so easily accessible as to go in a fucking store and buy a box of candy. It should not be that easy for somebody to buy a gun. There should be more mitigating circumstances. It should be a little less easy for people to acquire one, right? It's about keeping guns out of the wrong hands. You know, because anybody can be a killer. Anybody can be a shooter. It could be the rich white dude that drives a Jaguar up in the foothills. You know, so it could be fucking anybody. So I'm not the one to come up with a way to how to mitigate gun violence. You know, by taking guns out of the wrong hands, because who really are the wrong hands? And a lot of the time, it's the police. So here's a statement from a couple of people who did a study on police shot in the line of duty. It's just a statement. There's no numbers yet. Police are systematically socialized to understand their work of predominantly dangerous. Their work as if predominantly dangerous, and to understand that the public is the key driver of that danger. So police are trained that there actually is no such thing as a routine traffic stop. There is no such thing as a routine call for service. Instead, they are trained to view the world as full of infinite threats. So now here's reporting or some statistics from that the FBI released on May 4th, 2020. And it's cops killed in the line of duty. 48 died as a result of felonious acts. 41 died in accidents. This is in the line of duty. This is from 41 died from accidents, as in car accidents, training accidents, anything like that. Felonious acts are people that they were chasing, that they would call suspects, shot them. And in 2020, line of duty deaths by gunfire were only 45. New Mexico had 0 in 2020. And as of 2021, we're only in August, there have been 39. That's a significant increase, that is. But New Mexico only is responsible for 2 of those. Only 2. And this is from the Officer Down Memorial page. So who can object to that? I'm putting out a demand for Shaun Willoughby and the Albuquerque Police Officers Association to shut down their campaign right now. And I'm gonna need y'all support.